railroads have long been a part of Collierville's history, as I'm sure you will find out as we're talking. So when the railroad equivalent of the Air Force flyby, the roll-by, occurs behind me, I will stop talking because you won't hear me anyhow. Okay? This is the main line of the Norfolk Southern Railroad. It is, in fact, part of the railroad that was the first one to connect the Atlantic Ocean to the Mississippi River in 1857. The engine behind me, Frisco 1351, is even older than me, hard as it is to believe, built in 1912 in Schenectady, New York, by the American Locomotive Company, later shortened to Elkin. And it was modernized in 1943, and we'll talk about a little bit what they did with that. Behind me is the cab. That's where the engineer and the fireman work. The engineer drives the train, the fireman shovels wood, or pushes wood at the beginning, coal or oil, into the firebox to create the fire. Because really, a steam engine's pretty simple, in concept at least. Start a fire, boil water, make steam, use the steam to do useful work, in this case push a piston back and forth, it turns the wheels, and then the last thing that steam does is go out the smokestack. What that does, it creates a vacuum or a draft, like a draft in your household furnace, to pull the air through the firebox to keep the fire going and keep the steam. And as you can see, we've just recently, we call this preserved. It's not restored. I don't think it's, unless one of us wins a really good sized mega ball, it's probably not going to run again. There are probably other engines like this that have been much easier to restore than this one. But it's preserved, and so if you'd like to help the next preserve for the next generation, go buy a t-shirt in the museum. Okay? This engine actually started life in 1912 with number 1313. And I'll tell you in a minute what changed. It was modernized in 1943. It primarily hauled freight, but in 1943 it was enlarged to give it more power, so it hauled World War II troop trains. You know, hauled soldiers, passenger trains hauling soldiers as well. It ran until 1952 when it was retired. It was given to the city of Memphis. It was parked at the old Defense Depot, and then at the fairgrounds. It was moved here to Collierville in 1992. And it's been here, I don't know, I haven't been there long, but it's been here ever since. Yes, sir.
How do you move a train like this?
Oh, when it was at the fairgrounds, they, you know, like the track, I don't know if you saw the sectional track down there in the garden. Well, they had a whole bunch of that, and they just kept moving it. They had another engine. I guess actually they had like a tractor that was pulling it, because it rolls pretty easy on level ground. And they kept putting track, assembling track till they got it to a main line. Then they pulled it here in the locomotive and just backed it in. Some places you'll see, like in the middle of a town, they actually pick it up with a crane. Because the engine is just sitting on the wheels, basically. You can pick the boiler or firebox up. Again, I'm simplifying, but you can pick it up and put the wheels and put it back on. Good question. Yeah, feel free to ask questions. It's been here since 92. Feel free to ask questions.
Years.
Some I'll know the answer to, some I won't. See if you can tell the difference. 322,000 pounds. 207,000 pounds. That's fully loaded.
Wow.
So, as I said, it's pretty simple. You start a fire and you boil water. So what we're going to do as we do the talk, we'll kind of follow the water and steam through the engine. Okay, the water is stored in the back of the tender, and the coal is here. In the old days, the firemen had to shovel the coal by hand, but this one's fairly modern. There's a thing in here called a stoker. It's a mechanical feeder. It's like a big screw that moves the coal from the tender into the firebox. The fireman still had a job to kind of balance the fire. He might throw a shovel full of coal here and there to keep the fire hot and burning flat and level. His job was, it was still hot. Very hot, I think.
Yeah.
And someone asked me earlier, yeah, there were probably windows in there, but I think unless it was really cold out, those windows were open. Okay? The water was pumped from the tender. You can see this line here. There's a hose missing, right? The fabric hose is gone. Along here, this thing is called an injector, because it had to be injected into the boiler at high pressure. So they use steam to run the injector, the steam, water into the boiler. Now we got the boiler into the ring. The firebox is below. That's when we got a fire going. Big firebox, that makes sense. And the fire burns, surrounds the firebox. The hot water, as it gets hot, rises up, turns to steam, and it's collected down here. And this dump up here, the steam dump.
Oh.
Wet steam, saturated steam. It's just oil, kind of like the steam held off the pot on your stove. That steam, they take that and run it back through the boiler to heat it up. It's called superheating. I think if you look at your diagram there, number 20, you can see that that steam runs back through the top of the... Did everybody hear me, or do I need a megaphone?
Megaphone!
Yeah, they're fun, right? I got a siren too for them. So look at number 20. You can see the steam goes back through the flues where the hot gases are going by and is superheated, heated hotter. Okay, so now we've got steam ready to do some work. So if you'll follow me down to the front of the engine. Oh, I'm sorry, before we go, got off track. So I said the cab is where the engineer and the fireman work. The fireman's in charge of the fire in the firebox. That's pretty much a full-time job, monitoring it, keeping an eye on the water level. He'd have a little tube in there. It's not there now, pretty fragile. To watch the water level, to make sure there's enough water. He can control how much water goes in the boiler, how much coal or oil goes in the firebox. The engineer has a throttle, that horizontal bar up there that you can see, looking up there. And that controls how much steam goes to the valve, to the piston. And he's got a Johnson bar, invented by a guy named Johnson. Right?
Actually.
There are kids up there. Uh-oh. I hope they don't fall on me. And that controls, first of all, it controls forward and reverse. And it also controls how long the steam is admitted to the cylinder. Okay, so between the throttle and the Johnson bar, that's how the engineer starts the train, backs it up, and gets it running at a constant speed. Okay, so let's move to the front. Now, as we move to the front, we're going to count wheels. Who can count? You count? Okay,
I think
okay, you guys.
I think I
going
can.
to have two people count. Double check, right? We're going to count wheels. Remember I mentioned how this engine was modified in 1943? Because of the demands of World War II, the need for bigger engines, they enlarged the size of the firebox and the boiler and hold that additional weight. They put this set of wheels called a trailing truck. How many wheels? 2 wheels. Very good. It was a trick question. Good job.
2.
Right? And that was to hold the additional weight, a larger boiler and firebox. And this is kind of an interesting one, because if you look at this mechanism right here, this is a small steam engine on that trailing truck. So when the steam engine started up, they ran that engine to get additional power to get moving. Once it was moving 10 or 12 miles an hour, they turned it off. But to help get it started, or if they were starting, maybe going up a hill, going slow up the hills, they would use that additional power. And it ran off steam from the boiler. Okay, so now as we walk forward, we got some wheels here. And we're going to have some big wheels. We need to count those wheels. Everybody count down like we're big.
Let me go up in there, Alfred.
I'm gonna knock you. They just had them painting.
Oh, really? You see it happen?
It was like they had it all covered up. It was covered up like
Okay, the big one. We got 2 up here.
It's massive.
Not trailing. It's a truck. It's not trailing. What's it doing?
going in the engine.
All right, it's called a leading truck. It's leading the engine. As it goes around the corner, through switches, stuff like that. So, in engineer and locomotive talk, that is a 282. 282. Normally called a Mikado. Mikado is a Japanese ruler. So during World War II, it was not called a Mikado, for obvious reasons. For the same reason that Germantown changed its name to Neshoba. This was called a Calumet in World War II, but normally called a Mikado. And remember, it started out without that trailing truck back there? So then it was a what? Without that trailing truck, what is it?
280.
280. Excellent. Just engineer, I can tell. You're going to be an engineer. That's called a consolidation. Okay, so that's how steam locomotives are delineated. It's by the number of wheels. Okay, 212-2 is about the biggest one. That's about the longest one you can get. And then after that, there were articulated engines where they had two different sets of driving wheels put together. 4884. Right, that's about the biggest it's made. It was appropriately called the Big Boy. Perfect. Got it. There's a ringer in every crowd, folks. I'll tell you.
Well done.
Okay, so now we've got all that steam in the steam dome. We run it back and forth through the top of the boiler to superheat the steam to get as much energy as we can. Okay, so now if you look on your diagram, we're going to talk about 23, 24, and 25 at the front. Here, I got it. Okay, and that is the valve, the piston and cylinder. Okay, so your car engine has valves and pistons and cylinders. However, on a steam engine, it's a little different. In your car, the hot exhaust gases, combustion, the piston, it just pushes down on the top of the piston, right? And then it kind of floats back up. And this one, this valve, puts steam, emits steam on either side of the piston. So it's doing work both ways. Okay, which complicates how the valve works, and that's what all this stuff up here does. We'll talk about in a minute. So, the steam comes down here through this pipe into the valve. By the rotation of the engine, that valve is moving back and forth. You can see that cylindrical thing, number 23, is moving back and forth. The pink on there is showing you where the steam is admitted. So let's say it comes into the front of the piston pushes back. With this linkage right here, when the piston pushes back, it then pulls that valve back. It stops the steam going in the front of the piston. For a while, there's no steam, and then it gets far enough back, it pushes steam on the back side of the piston, pushes it forward, and that keeps it moving. Okay?
Oh, we just went.
Everybody with me so far? Okay, so now that's fairly simple.
It's more complicated when we get there.
Right, but now to make it work efficiently and effectively, we got to have all this stuff. So the piston pushes on the piston rod right here, just like a piston rod in your car, a little bigger, but same concept, to the crosshead. And I apologize, I have a sign that says crosshead. It must be in my house because it didn't come with me. Okay, and the crosshead, that's connected to the side rod.
Which is also connected to the main rod.
And the main rod is connected to the drivers, right? And so the main rod is the thing that makes all those wheels turn. There's a similar operation on the
How does he know all this?
But they're about 90 degrees out of phase, so we don't vibrate, don't beat the thing to death. Okay, how does it reverse? Right? Backwards. Good point. Okay, it backs up. See this rod right here? Remember we talked about the Johnson bar in the cab, the reversing lever? Okay, that's connected to that. The engineer in this train had it easy because he's got power steering. He's got a power assist on that Johnson bar. Some trains, it's all muscle.
No, not today.
Back on that Johnson bar, you follow this mechanism through right here. It changes the angle of the radius arm, this thing. And what it does, it pulls the valve back so that the steam is admitted to the back side of the piston, and that makes the engine go backwards. And so if he pushes it all the way forward, the reverse happens, the steam goes through the valve to the front side of the piston and it goes forward. The other thing the engineer can do with that is control how long the steam is admitted into the piston, right? The throttle on top is the amount of steam that comes to the valve, but how long it gets emitted is controlled by that mechanism there.
So basically, what you're saying is, whenever it goes forwards, it's actually reversing the rods, right? Because it would the mechanism, the valve, steam goes through the pipe, it goes through there, and then with the rods, it pushes it. Or pulls it.
It would push the rod to go forward. It would push the rod backwards, which would make the wheels go forward. When it's going back up, it would pull the rod forward,
right,
which would make the thing go
backwards. So it would.
Is that clear?
Yeah.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah,
right.
Push it to go forwards, right, and then pull it to go backwards.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, the sand dome, we'll get to that in a second. So the sand dome, very simply, if when they're starting out, if it's got a heavy load, needed more traction, they would spray sand on the tracks, or if it's running wet, yeah, real slippery. Yeah, you can see those little tubes. See those little tubes in front of the drivers? Comes from the sand dome down there. It's just additional track, like putting chains on your car. Yeah. Does anybody ever do that anymore? Not down here. Okay, does anybody have any idea what I was talking about for a minute?
Yes, actually, because
No, you got a recording.
no, I'm saying whenever, because I'm from Ohio, I lived in Ohio.
Okay.
Of course, a lot of snow,
Yep.
and so, but there were times where people did put chains on their cars, and because of the snow and the ice on the roads.
Yep. We lived in the mountains of Germany, and my wife and I both got pretty good at putting chains in. We don't do that anymore. AAA is talking about the. Yeah. Okay, we're talking about the mechanism. Thank you. Okay,
Yes.
so this controls forward and back. It also controls how long the steam goes in the cylinder. Thank you. And so you need a lot of steam for a long length of time when you're starting out. But when you're rolling, it's kind of like going from first gear to high gear. You just need a little bit of steam, and you just let the steam expand. The energy of the steam expanding drives the engine. So you cut off the amount of steam, and that's what that's called, the cutoff. So you've probably got 85% of the time when you're starting out, you've got steam committed to the cylinder, and maybe a cruise 15%. And so that's basically how it all works. There are a bunch of other things. These things, somebody asked me, those are springs, leaf springs. Probably don't have those in your car anymore, but we used to have leaf springs. The sand dome we've talked about. The thing behind the steam dome, you can see that little, looks like a valve. That is a safety valve. So if the pressure in the boiler got too high, in theory at least, that safety valve would pop. Because if it didn't, it would get real exciting for everybody. Steam dome, sand dome. The thing in front of the stack is the whistle. Okay. There's a bell and a headlight on the front. Okay. Let's see if there's anything else I'm supposed to tell you. Okay. So now, we didn't have our roll by. I couldn't schedule it well. But you notice out here, there aren't any steam engine on the Norfolk and Southern line. The last steam engine in revenue service, getting paid, was in the mid-60s.
Oh,
Diesel
jeez.
started coming in during World War II. They got cheaper to buy, and they're a lot simpler to maintain. They're very reliable. They're not as hard on the track. They're not as hard on the people in the train. And so by mid-60s, there are no more steam engines in revenue service. You're finding them only in a museum. But they're museum ones. Right, yeah, there are no, there are no steam engines that are hauling passengers or freight for pay. I mean, if you want to go to there's one in Chattanooga, one in Knoxville, right? You could ride behind a steam engine. Strasburg, Pennsylvania. But I mean, the Norfolk and Southern is not using any steam engines. They've got one they use for excursion trains.
Right. Right.
But there's none out. It's primarily because of the cost of buying them, the infrastructure, right? You don't need a water tower every 40 miles. You don't need a coal tower every 100 miles. You don't need a shop every couple hundred miles to fix it when it breaks. So the steam engine has virtually been replaced by the diesel. Okay?
The width of the track has never changed over the years?
Pardon?
Has the width of the track
Oh, no,
changed?
the width of the track, 4 feet, 8.5 inches, has been that for a long time. So does anybody know how we came up with the width of that track?
Oh.
It's a real good reason. It's the width of the chariot wheels that the Romans used in Great Britain.
Huh.
There's trivia for you. That gets you a drink at the bar. So that's a reason, perhaps not a good one, but that's how the train track width in England was put together, and the first trains that came to America came from England, 4 feet, 8.5 inches. It's been that way. There are some trains like through mountain train. Anybody been to Durango, Colorado? Durango, Silverton, Maryland? That's a 3 foot. That's a narrow gauge, 3 foot wide. If you go to Russia, the track gauge there is 5 feet.
Huh.
For whatever reason. But generally, most of them on all the main lines you see around here, 4 feet, 8.5 inches.
Is that center to center or
Yeah.
outside?
one edge to the same edge the other track.
No, let me go find something.
If the brakes fail, then how could you stop the train? Yeah, put a reverse speed going. If you turn the steam off,
What?
right, there's no steam going to the valve, that's going to resist the train. Now, it's not going to stop. Well, first of all, the train does not stop quickly under the best of conditions.
Nope.
So, turning off the steam is one way. There's no emergency brake. There's no pulling up on the emergency brake. Yeah, you just got to let it coast to a stop. That's why there are train brakes and there are engine brakes. So if you have a problem with one, you still got the other one to slow down and stop. Now the brakes are with the air compressor, and the air compressor is right through there.
Oh.
Air brakes, air compressor. It works just like the old drum brakes on your car. Just pushes on the wheel. Just a pad pushes on the wheel. Okay, thank you for standing out here in the hot sun with me.
All right.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay, if you got
Thank
any
you.
questions, I'll stand here. Can I get these?
No, you gotta leave it.